across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, it's Saturday morning. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. What a dramatic 24 hours it has been. I was presenting Drive yesterday, and oh my goodness, when that footage, when that argument came through between Trump and Zelensky, it really changed the whole nature of international politics. What do you think? And who do you think was right? Today we're asking the question, whose side are you on? Who was right, Zelensky or Trump? We'll play you a little bit of their argument. We've got Mark Francois ready to go. He's the Shadow Defence Minister giving his reaction. A load of different guests in Ukraine, here in the United Kingdom, in Europe. What does Keir Starmer do? What does the rest of the European community do? That's one story we're covering for 2 hours today here on Talk. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word Talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV or follow me at Peter Cardwell. Send me a voice note if you want to. Send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk. So I've been covering or at the heart of politics for years, really for my whole adult life, and I worked in politics for 3.5 years. I've never seen anything as crazy, as jaw-dropping as what happened yesterday. I grew up in the toxic, very dangerous world of Northern Ireland politics, where politicians were sometimes threatened, sometimes shot at, sometimes even murdered. Dialogue gave way to noisy rhetoric and intemperate language. But to see the leader of the free world, the man we rely on to stand behind us in times of crisis, joining in with J.D. Vance and bullying, harassing, I think, the attempted humiliation of a wartime president who has the admiration of so many people, the wholehearted backing of many other world leaders, is really, really shocking. Who do you think's right today, Trump or Zelensky? I think Zelensky got a raw deal yesterday. I think Trump made some points that were okay, but should he have made them in the way that he made them? It's a really, really interesting debate. I want to get as many people on the air today as possible, as well as all our guests. 0344 499 1000. Let's just remind ourselves, before we talk to Shadow Defence Minister Mark Francois, of what happened yesterday.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the President for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine? Did you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Come once.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree that you've had problems bringing people into your military? And do you think that it's respectful to come to the Oval Office of the United States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country?
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems, even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless. God bless. You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's
Remember
exactly
this. You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
You will feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards.
I'm not playing cards.
Right now, you don't.
Yeah,
you're playing cards.
Mr. President.
You're playing cards.
Serious.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country. That's back to you. Far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once? this entire meeting? No, in this entire meeting, have you said thank you? You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
Please, you think that if you will speak very loudly about the war, you can...
He's not speaking loudly. He's not speaking loudly. Your country is in big trouble.
Can I
Wait a
answer?
minute. No, you've done a lot of talking. Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
You're not winning. You're not winning this. You have a damn good chance of coming out okay because of us.
Mr. President, we are staying in our country, staying strong from the very beginning of the war. We've been alone, and we are thankful. I said thanks
you haven't been
in this
alone.
cabinet,
you
and
haven't
not
been
only
alone.
in this cabinet.
We gave you, through this stupid president, $350 billion.
You voted
we gave
for
you
your
military equipment, and your men are brave, but they had to use our military.
What about
if you didn't have our military equipment, if you didn't have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3 days. I heard it from Putin. In 3 days.
A very tetchy Vladimir Zelensky there, a very argumentative J.D. Vance, and of course Donald Trump. There's been a reaction from around the world. There have been a number of leaders who are standing with, it's very interesting, they say they're standing with Ukraine. Not too many people who are with Zelensky personally or mention Zelensky in their tweets and so on. Interesting from Keir Starmer as well. Number 10 spokeswoman said last night, the Prime Minister has tonight spoken to both President Trump and President Zelensky. He retains his unwavering support for Ukraine and is playing his part to find a path forward to a lasting peace based on sovereignty and security for Ukraine. The Prime Minister looks forward to hosting international leaders on Sunday, including President Zelensky. And yes, there is a big international conference in London at Lancaster House tomorrow. We're going to preview that in some depth on the show tomorrow between 10 and 1. But for today, we're going to reflect on a little bit on Starmer, but mainly on where on earth things are with the war in Ukraine. I'm delighted that Mark Francois is with me. He is the Shadow Defence Minister for the Conservatives. Mark, where do you start?
I'm with Zelensky.
Okay.
The only person that really benefited from what happened yesterday is Vladimir Putin. He must be laughing his head off. And if you're going to have difficult discussions, and it's an open secret that Trump doesn't like Zelensky, this all goes back to Hunter Biden and the laptop, they should have had those discussions in private. You know, I haven't seen the whole 50-minute clip. I should be clear about that.
And that's a really interesting point, actually, which has been lost in a lot of this, in that it's 45, 50 minutes. It was a very, very long discussion. Usually what happens is they bring the press in, they get their well, certainly not usually, but in the Biden administration and in other administrations, they come in, the snappers get their photograph, off they go. This was a very long conversation and it got heated in the last 10 minutes.
Yes, I mean, they should have had those conversations in private, so that they could have had a free and frank exchange of views, but not on camera. That only helped Putin. So I think they just did it the wrong way. And Trump and Zelensky have, ironically, something in common. They both survived murder attempts. People tried to assassinate Trump. The Russians, when they invaded, tried to kill Zelensky. When they came over the border, they sent multiple assassination squads into Kyiv with the sole objective of killing him, or at least capturing him. He survived that. A lesser man would have got out of there. As we now know, he was offered a helicopter flight out. He could have escaped. And he famously said, "I don't need a ride, I need ammunition." That is Churchillian defiance. There's a bust of Winston Churchill in Trump's office. Okay, the two men disagree, but Zelensky did not deserve the treatment that he was given yesterday.
Is he totally innocent here? Wasn't he naive? Didn't he? I mean, look, when you are sitting beside the leader of the free world, the most powerful person, shouldn't you just listen to them a little bit more rather than being more argumentative as he was?
Well, perhaps, but at the end of the day, he stuck up for himself. You know, it's the same kind of person who said, "I don't need a ride, I need ammunition." I mean, Peter, if you sat there when you were being berated by the President of the US, I'm sure you'd like to feel you'd have at least the moral courage to push back a bit. It was one-sided. And as you saw in the clip, it was 2 against 1. So I really think that was the wrong way for the president to handle the whole matter. And now, for context, we had a debate in the House of Commons last Thursday, you know, as the Prime Minister was arriving in America. And there was absolute cross-party support right across the Commons, even Tice from Reform. Everybody was with Zelensky. And the British House of Commons was adamant on 2 points. One, there should be no negotiations about Ukraine without Ukraine. We couldn't possibly accept any solution that was on Putin's terms. Now, how are these negotiations now going to progress after this?
This is my question, because...
You know, where do we go from here?
The world is waking up to this. Most people saw at least some of it yesterday. People are forming their opinions. We've got reactions, of course, to so many from so many different leaders right across Europe. A lot of them saying we stand with Ukraine. The word I often don't see in those tweets is the word Zelensky, and I wonder about his own position and whether he could be seen perhaps as some sort of obstacle to peace. Is that taking things too far?
Well, if you look at what the man has been through, and then to be lectured on how he's fought the defence of his own country live on camera in front of...
I totally get that, Mark, but I'm interested in the point that essentially if Trump has just decided this guy is an obstacle, actually, I wonder, is there a way back? And is there a way, perhaps Keir Starmer, he says he wants to be a bridge in all of this, with his sort of grey man persona. Can he bring them back together in some way?
Well, we're going to have this European summit this weekend. That is now exceptionally important in light of what's happened. And Starmer, no doubt, will come to the House of Commons on Monday and deliver a statement post his visit. That would be the normal thing to do. And then he'll answer questions in the House of Commons in the usual way. But I do think that the Prime Minister and the government should not remain completely neutral in this. I think what Trump did was wrong. And I think that the Prime Minister should have the moral courage at the dispatch box to say so. So, you know, we want a trade deal with the United States. We know that we do. But the future of NATO and the security of the West, of which Ukraine is now a fundamental part, is more important than a trade deal. So I think the PM will come to the Commons on Monday and he'll answer questions. And I think he needs to make clear what the government's position is. Now, talking of clarity, as far as I know, one other leader who's not said a word on this so far is Nigel Farage. Now, I've known Nigel for years. I think it's fair to say we get on as men. We're fellow Essex MPs. But I'd like to know Nigel's view on this. And if, as he always likes to tell us, he's got Trump on speed dial, if he's got his private mobile, now's the time, Nigel, to make the call. I think Nigel Farage, if he can do it, should ring Trump today and say what he did was wrong, and remind him that the whole of the House of Commons last Thursday, Nigel wasn't there, Tice was, were absolutely behind Zelensky. So I hope Nigel Farage will pick up the phone and then tell us that he's done it. Because he so often tells us how well he gets on with Trump. Well, now's the time to use that relationship to good effect. We're talking now about the future of the West, about the integrity of NATO. This is really serious. Okay. And forgive me for making a point that I've made before, but it bears repetition in this context. The only time Article 5 of the Washington Treaty, an attack on one is an attack on all clause, has ever been invoked was by America in 2001 after 9/11, quite rightfully, and European NATO, particularly the United Kingdom, came to America's aid. We had special forces working alongside Delta Force, hunting terrorists in the caves of Bora Bora within weeks. So the one time the NATO treaty, Article 5, has ever been invoked, it was by the US, and the Brits turned up. Okay. And, you know, that maybe is something that it's worth reminding the White House about today.
Of course there has been a reaction right around the world. There's also been more words from Zelensky and Trump. What happened was that Zelensky was basically told, leave the White House, off you go. And he left I suppose about half an hour or so after the row became public. He later spoke to Fox News, and I just want your reaction, Mark, to what happened on Fox News. This is what Zelensky told Fox News last night.
I think this kind of spat is I mean, this I mean, this is not good for both sides anyway, and I'm very open, but I can't, change our Ukrainian attitude to Russia, and I don't want they kill us for us. This is very, very clear that Americans are the best of our friends, Europeans are the best of our friends, and Putin with Russian, they're enemies. And it doesn't mean that we don't want peace. We just want to recognize the reality, the real situation.
Trump then reacted to that, wearing a MAGA hat. This is what he said.
He doesn't want to do that, that's fine. Do a better deal. I want it to end immediately. I want a ceasefire now. He says, oh, I don't want a ceasefire. Well, all of a sudden he's a big shot because he has the U.S. on his side. Either we're going to end it or let him fight it out. And if he fights it out, it's not going to be pretty. Because without us, he doesn't win.
Very interesting, Mark, talking about, on that rhetoric, not just in the Oval Office, but in that clip as well, before President Trump got on Marine One there, talking about possible withdrawal of American support. How serious do you think he is in that? And if it happens, the implications would be really, really serious.
Well, it goes further than that. Does Donald Trump believe in Article 5? Because if he doesn't, the whole world just changed.
Well, Ukraine is not a NATO country, though.
No, it's not. But he's been berating European NATO nations for not increasing their defence spending. Now, on that, he's right. He absolutely has a point. He often uses this analogy that you join a golf club, you pay the membership fee. And a few years ago, well, when he was in his first term, there were only 4 members of European NATO that spent 2% of GDP on defence. That was the target. We were one of them, by the way. Now there's 23. So on that, Trump does have a point. But people will look at this whole thing, and in Beijing, they'll say, how committed is this guy really? And Ian Duncan Smith led this debate in the Commons on Thursday. He spoke brilliantly. He'd just come back from Ukraine, and he made the fundamental point: the road to Taiwan runs through Ukraine. If we let Putin win in Ukraine, Xi will only be emboldened to invade Taiwan. This is really serious stuff. And I hope that some of the more thoughtful voices in Congress will start to raise questions about this. So, we need to see on Monday how the House of Commons reacts to this. We also need to watch very carefully what happens at the summit this weekend, the European summit. And we also need to watch very carefully how Congress reacts to this.
Although it's interesting, some congressional people, let's see if we can actually get that clip from Lindsey Graham, Senator Lindsey Graham. He has been a big supporter of Trump, of course. He's been a big supporter of Ukraine. He has actually been quite a big supporter of Zelensky and had a discussion with Zelensky before the White House. But now he has changed his tune as well. Do we have this clip from Lindsey Graham? Let's play this from Senator Lindsey Graham, very important person on Capitol Hill in Washington.
Complete, utter disaster. I've been to Ukraine 8 or 9 times since the war started. I understand the consequences of Putin's actions against Ukraine. I appreciate what the Ukrainian people have done. President Trump was in a very good mood last night. Somebody asked me, am I embarrassed about Trump? I have never been more proud of the president. I was very proud of J.D. Vance, standing up for our country. We want to be helpful. What I saw in the Oval Office was disrespectful, and I don't know if we can ever do business with Zelensky.
I mean, that is fascinating. You've got one of the most pro-Ukrainian senators saying, I don't know if we're going to do business with Zelensky again. He says he's never been more proud of the president. I'm not saying that Lindsey Graham has the consensus opinion, but he is a very important person saying big things there.
I'm not denying that. And Senator Graham is a man to be respected. We don't know what all these congressmen are saying in private. But nonetheless, if we come back to the fundamentals of it, Vladimir Putin is a man that sends cruise missiles to blow up children's hospitals. This is what we're talking about. Imagine for a second, please God no, that they did that here. How would our public react? So, yes, Zelensky might be spiky in defence of his country and his people. I think we could see that. But after what he's been through, is it any wonder? I just think that, if I may, the fundamental problem was the format. They just shouldn't have done it that way with all the cameras. They should have, as you say, done some, photographs for the historical record, perhaps had some pleasantries, gone into a locked room, and then they could have said whatever they wanted to each other.
And it wouldn't have mattered particularly. It would have mattered, but in a behind-the-scenes diplomatic way.
And it wouldn't have been a propaganda boon for Vladimir Putin.
Mark, really interesting talking to you, as it almost always is.
Thank you.
Mark Francois there,
Very kind of you.
the Shadow Defence Minister, with his analysis there. Really interesting. We'll see, of course, what happens in London tomorrow with that European summit. And I want to ask you as well, Zelensky versus Trump. Whose side are you on? 0344 499 1000. We'll be on the debate desk in a second. Slightly different one, because we've got quite a lot of guests today. Lots of different opinions on this. Let me know yours. As I say, stay with us here on Talk.
I said what I said, which is that we do have, of course, a special relationship with our friends in the UK and also with some of our European allies, but we also know that there have been infringements on free speech that actually affect not just the British. Of course, what the British do in their own country is up to them, but also affect American technology companies and, by extension, American citizens.
We've had free speech for a very, very long time in the United Kingdom, and it will last for a very, very long time. Well, no, I mean, certainly we wouldn't want to reach across US citizens, and we don't, and that's absolutely right.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Stuart's been in touch. He says Zelensky and Trump are in different places regarding the war. Ukrainians have lived the horrors of Soviet rule before, while Trump just sees it as an opportunity to get something out of it, like minerals. Mick in Wallington, Trump is aware we are danger close. We must wake up and divert all the money from foreign aid and net zero to defence. It is too late now. Mark in Suffolk, regarding the White House meeting yesterday, I totally agree with Trump's position. The virtue signalling side shows of Zelensky flying around the world from one photo op to another. If he'd taken Trump's deal, he would have the strongest alliance. Amanda says, good morning, Peter. I believe the Oval Office bust-up was pre-arranged by Trump and Vance to shake things up before the world's press with the hopes of advancing peace negotiations on both sides. Some criticism of me as well. Let me see if I can find this one from this person telling me to go to Ukraine and fight. I don't think that's going to happen, but I do have an opinion on it. Yeah, Tess says, if you feel so much for Zelensky, why don't you go and fight for Ukraine and Starmer's propaganda machine? Well, that's not going to happen, Tess, but I'm entitled to my opinion, as are you. Zelensky versus Trump, which side are you on? Mary in County Down says, I think Zelensky's biggest mistake yesterday was to treat this as a discussion rather than a performance. His questioning of Vance about the nature and value of ceasefire with Russia when Putin had broken it so many times since 2013 was for the meeting table, not the Oval Office. Zelensky is comfortable in chaos, but he's confident, robust, and holds his line. Don't play the grateful supplicant, is happy to discuss and debate. He didn't play the role expected of him yesterday. He didn't see the danger of challenging Vance and Trump on their rhetoric. Like most world leaders, he's overconfident and arrogant. That's what got him there. But unlike most world leaders, he didn't realise that you're always in the shadow of the US president and you do not have equal billing. An actor should know this. One more from Lisa. Morning, Peter. I felt quite sorry for Zelensky. Trump and JD should have been more respectful. Nigel Farage has tweeted within the last few minutes, the spat in the White House last night is regrettable and will make Putin feel like the winner. But this is not the end of the story. Far from it. A peace deal is essential and Ukraine needs the right security guarantees. We will certainly, it'll be very, very interesting to see what the reaction is to that. Farage, one of the many politicians who has responded to this row. Well, we're on the debate desk right now with Phil Dave and Lucy Beresford, broadcasters both. Lucy, of course, is a psychotherapist as well. Great to see you. Phil, maybe I could start with you. Whose side are you on?
Look, I think to say whose side implies that this whole thing is a bit black and white, and I'm not so convinced it is. I would say I understand what Trump was trying to do. I just don't think, typical Trump, that he went about it necessarily in the right way, I would argue. So I could say I'm erring more towards Trump, probably.
Lucy?
Even though you haven't got your red hat on, I'm very in Zelensky's camp. Very in Zelensky's camp. I thought it was a 2-on-1 pylon. And Trump gave it away right at the end. He said, well, this is making really great television. And it was. He was treating it as if it was an episode of one of his shows. But it was also really abusive. Psychologically, what you had were two men ganging up on another one, not letting him speak, very hectoring body language from J.D. Lump, really kind of holding up his finger saying, you will not talk. And this sense that, in a way, they were bullying him. And they could do that because that was their theatre. They were owning the stage.
And you didn't even need to be a body language expert to see Trump wagging his finger, J.D. Vance wagging his finger, and Zelensky literally shutting down the body language, folding his arms, protecting himself. Very interesting from Zelensky on Fox News last night. Just want to play another little clip from this interview. This was done after the Oval Office. It was done about 11 o'clock last time, so sort of tea time in Washington and on the east coast of America. This is what Zelensky said to Fox News on terms of apologies. Very interesting thoughts here.
I respect the president and I respect American people, and if I don't know if I think that we have to be very open and very honest, and I'm not sure that we did something bad. I think maybe sometimes some things we have to discuss out of media, with all respect to democracy and to a free.
Should this discussion have been behind closed doors, Phil?
Oh, that is for sure. I think we can all agree that last night was an absolute circus, and I don't care what anyone says. You know, there's no mistaking it was completely deliberate to have the cameras in the Oval Office when they did, and
but they always do that.
But not like that, for goodness sake. I mean, like, there are certain discussions that absolutely should take place behind closed doors, and that was just one of them. You know, the bottom line is that both Trump and Zelensky, in their history, are reality TV stars, you know. So, I mean, I suppose that they're both used to performing to the cameras in whichever way they want. But I guess that sort of more from a point of view of actually trying to sort of think tactically here in terms of what Trump was trying to achieve. My reckoning is that he's obviously trying to break this vicious cycle that we're in. We've had 3 years under Biden trying to stick his beak into this whole conflict. And by trying to say, look, what are you going to do? Something's got to give here. Enough's enough already. The truth is, whether we like it or not, people very rarely will be able to stand up to the might of the Russian army. You know, they are very, very strong, and the chances are that
they haven't beaten the Ukrainians though, and they've only occupied a fifth. Well, I don't think they're going to.
But it was meant to be over in 3 days, and
exactly.
It's now been 3 years.
And they've only occupied a fifth of the country. They haven't gone to Kyiv, apart from this feint that
But how else? Yeah, but how have they done it? They've managed to do that with Western assistance, and if that Western assistance keeps going, then yeah, absolutely, they'll be able to resist. But if that stops, then what happens?
And that's the big question, isn't it? Because we heard again in that clip we played a little bit earlier of Trump getting on Marine One, getting on the helicopter there, again threatening to withdraw American support, Lucy.
But again, it's the language of the Uber parent. It's about saying, you know, to Zelensky, treating him like a child and saying, I'm going to send you to your room, and when you've sat and thought about how badly you've behaved, then you can come out and you can negotiate with us. And he's trying to give that impression of that power. But in a way, he's ending up making himself actually look much weaker.
Is he though?
Well,
I mean, a lot of people saying American, a lot of senators saying, you know, Lindsey Graham never been prouder. Loads of different American senators and different congressmen saying that he's strong.
All of the European leaders have come out in favour of Ukraine, and if
but
there
not
was
Zelensky, they've come out. They've talked about Ukraine. They don't talk about Zelensky.
I think that is a very interesting point, and I think the idea that Zelensky is now becoming the lightning rod for any negative criticism is probably going to end up with him having to step down. And a couple of days ago he had actually said, if it makes it better, if it leads to peace, then I will step down. But the idea is that somehow what it's done is it's united a lot of the global leaders more around Ukraine. And if that was Trump's intention, as if to say, you know, you've wanted America to be the backstop for long enough, and we're giving up on that role, we have gone rogue.
Yeah, Phil, quickly.
I was just going to say, you never know. Donald Trump is a very savvy individual. People say he acts like an idiot, but who knows? It may well be that actually now this has brought the Ukraine argument back to the surface
We weren't talking about peace in Ukraine 3 weeks ago. We now are. We weren't. Many European countries weren't talking about upping defence spending 3 weeks ago. They now have.
The irony is that actually it could lead to the end of the Ukraine-Russian war.
But why is that irony? That's what he wants.
Because after that is over, what are all the European allies going to say about America? They are never going to trust America again. This has actually changed the global order, but not in the way that we thought it would. It's not about Ukraine any longer.
Very interesting thoughts. We've got a lot of calls, texts and tweets coming into the building. I'm going to take a call on the debate desk. After the break, we're also going to talk to Simon Diggins and Mary Dejevsky, two of the best analysts around in regard to the military and diplomatic side of this. We're going to stick with Phil and with Lucy too, and get your call in 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Joanna in Salisbury says, good morning, Cardi P. There are no winners in war. Yesterday was a ridiculous bullying session. Lack of English was unfair. To be honest, Zelensky's English is pretty good, and I'm not sure I agree with you on that, Joanna. In 1994, the US, France and the UK guaranteed Ukraine's independence and sovereignty if they gave up nuclear weapons. Putin couldn't be trusted then or now, unfortunately. If Cameron, Obama and Francois Hollande hadn't let Ukraine down in 2014 over Crimea, we wouldn't be here. Yeah, interesting on Putin as well. I wonder what he was up to in 1994. That was probably when he was driving the taxi. Yeah, very interesting thoughts there, Joanna. Don't entirely agree just on the point of the lack of English, but nonetheless, great points. Another Peter here says, I am a Trump supporter, but I was disgusted by the attack, because that's all you can call it, of Trump and his Vice President J.D. Vance on Zelensky. It was like watching a moneylender extorting revenge on a vulnerable Ukrainian purely for their own advantage. If you don't pay up and bow down to the emperor, then we will allow your wife and children to die. We will encourage Putin to bully through our rhetoric to devastate you further by withdrawing our support. Step forward, the real Trump. David says, how is the war in Ukraine going to end? When will the slaughter of hundreds of thousands of young men and women stop? Send into battle all the politicians with their families and the war would end in 24 hours. And one more from Lorraine, who says, this may be a journalistic spectacle, but what I witnessed was two very aggressive bullies in an orchestrated, deliberate attack on Zelensky. It was very upsetting to watch. Zelensky was not allowed to speak. It was disgraceful. Unlike Starmer, at least Zelensky has the strength to stand up for his country as it is butchered by Putin. Appalling behaviour from America, especially J.D. Vance. Let me get a quick reaction to that from Phil and Lucy on the debate desk. Then I want to talk to Simon Diggins and Mary Dejevsky. Phil.
I want to use the word orchestrated because it was mentioned in that message there. I question actually how orchestrated the whole thing was. How much did Zelensky know beforehand? Because for all we know, this actually could have been a very well rehearsed session that
I don't think it was.
All of them knew that this was how it was going to play out. And subsequently, we are all now talking about it, and the Ukrainian war has been brought to the surface again. And as far as I'm concerned, you know, if all it does is it unites Western leaders to try and turn around to Putin and say, look, you...
Against Trump, though? I mean, why would Trump unite people against him? Do you think it was orchestrated, Lucy?
I don't think it was orchestrated, although there was also a planted question at the beginning about asking Zelensky why he wasn't wearing a suit. And we all know why he's not wearing a suit, because he is committed to not wearing a suit and wearing battle fatigues instead during the war. Yeah. So that felt like trying to wrong
And the first thing Trump said when he arrived at the portico was, you dressed up for the occasion,
yes, exactly.
Which was again putting him down.
So exactly, there was contempt there, they were very patronising, and this idea that somehow both J.D. Vance and Donald Trump were obsessed with this idea of gratitude, even though Zelensky has, on more than one occasion, actually talked about it on air and in his presence. So it makes them come across as incredibly fragile and very thin-skinned. And of course, those are critiques that have been levelled at Trump before.
Let me go to Mary and Simon. Mary Dejevsky is a foreign affairs columnist at The Independent. Simon Diggins is a defence analyst. Simon, where do we stand now, especially with this huge security conference that's coming up tomorrow? Zelensky's going to be here in London at Lancaster House. They're going to be discussing that with various Western European leaders. I just wonder where on earth, defence-wise, especially if America pulls out, where we are.
No, I think that's one of the key questions. I think my sense originally was that the conference tomorrow, which was planned in advance, was essentially about sealing the deal. This was a week of kind of resetting and everything that went with it, and there were the kind of, we thought we understood the outlines of the deal: a European force with an American backstop, and Ukraine, in fact, offsetting that by a kind of mineral deal with the US. And I think the conference originally was planned like that. It now is kind of completely different. It now looks like a conference is going to be about Europe having to do this by itself without the guarantee of an American backstop, and that's a completely different scale of issue. There's also a more immediate issue which was raised, and it's certainly it was being discussed last night in the Washington Post, as whether or not President Trump will actually stop immediate deliveries of military aid to Ukraine.
Certainly his rhetoric would seem to suggest that, or certainly that he's thinking about it, Simon.
No, absolutely. And that will be very, very difficult for Ukraine to deal with, because this obviously supplies that they're looking forward to be able to use within the next month or so. So if that doesn't happen, it'll be very difficult for the Europeans to backfill that very, very quickly. So still in a very, very tense situation. There has been some sort of slight smoothing over, and people say deals can still be made. But I think the conference tomorrow is going to be much, much more focused and with a larger and more problematic agenda than was originally intentioned.
Mary Dejevsky, you have covered international affairs for a while. Have you seen anything quite like this before?
I have never seen anything even remotely like this before. I wouldn't say that it was orchestrated at all. It was an absolute catastrophe. And I think in some ways it makes the whole argument for having professional diplomats. This is not the sort of thing that should ever appear before the cameras. And I just say, when I've covered this sort of event, as journalists, a group is ushered in before the talks start. And basically there's sort of pleasantries between the individuals around the table, and then all the journalists are ushered out. It's a matter of minutes.
And I as a special advisor, I've orchestrated those things and said they're called top shots. They come in, they get shots of the cameramen get shots of what are called the top of the meeting for about 2 minutes. You say absolutely nothing of any consequence whatsoever. You talk about the weather or the person's journey or welcome them, and then they get out. And that's what the Biden administration did. And Trump, of course, does things very, very differently. He did it very differently with Starmer as well, but Starmer reacted so differently.
And with Macron. And there was like almost a sort of pre-talks press conference, spontaneous beforehand for however many minutes. And this one just went on and on and on. And the only thing I would add to everything that everybody's said is that I do think that before talking about ambushes and deliberate stage management, it's worth watching the whole thing, which is sort of 40 minutes, because the first part of this is, it's not exactly a super friendly, super respectful exchange of views, but it's not what happened in the last 10 minutes.
Yeah. What happens now, Mary?
Well, I think one of the really interesting things which I was trying to gauge last night is the different responses on the different sides of the Atlantic, because it seemed to me from a very early stage that if you were looking at public opinion across Europe was going to come out in favour of Zelensky and say, he was ambushed, he had a horrible time, they were picking on him, his English wasn't up to it, and he was the victim. If you're American, we saw Lindsey Graham, who's been one of the chief advocates for Zelensky in American politics, basically saying that President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance, that they did a spectacular job, and that I think you'll get American public opinion largely lining up with Trump and Vance.
Simon, Mary's right, isn't she? It's really interesting in regard to the support for Ukraine. But to me, and maybe I'm just being reading a bit too much into this, but I've seen a lot of people, Ursula von der Leyen and various other people, Olaf Scholz, putting out messages in favour of Ukraine, saying they stand with Ukraine. But I haven't seen the word Zelensky very much. Simon, what do you make of that?
I think people can distinguish between President Zelensky and Ukraine. There are internal political issues within Ukraine, and inevitably, when you're faced with a war, basically an existential war for an independent, sovereign country, then some of those internal political issues are put to one side. We know that internally the Ukrainians actually basically support him. There's very strong numbers of 54% plus approval ratings from that. Yes, he did lose his temper. And here, if I may, Peter, I'll also disagree with you slightly over business about speaking in English. Angela Merkel spoke very good English as well. But whenever she had sort of international conferences or meeting people, she spoke in a native language, and it gave her a chance to think about it, calm herself down, and everything went with it. I think under pressure, people, even if they've got a good second language, often say things they don't mean to do. And there's no question about it. President Zelensky lost his temper, but he lost his temper under enormous pressure, bullying pressure from the president and Vice President Trump. So I'm not so sure you can draw a big distinction. Okay. I think the view is still pro-Ukraine, and try not to lose your temper again, President Zelensky would probably be the message.
I wonder, Mary, if you could evaluate our own Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. Could he be the bridge he wants to be here? Could he be the person who brings Trump and Zelensky back together in some way?
Well, it did occur to me yesterday that this was actually a gigantic opportunity, or it could be, for the British, because by chance, in a way, the UK is hosting tomorrow's meeting, first with Zelensky and then this European gathering. So there is an opportunity there. But I just wonder whether there's really an opportunity for anybody to form a bridge at the moment. Relations just seem so fraught, and even though both Trump and Zelensky, they have, within a couple of hours of this catastrophe, they did actually both come out in different ways and sort of said, well, we've got to step back a bit. I sort of think that maybe some people have said that Zelensky really ought to call an election and then, get his mandate renewed, and that then he'd be in a stronger position now more than ever. I think there's probably a very good argument for him appointing a personal envoy of some sort to conduct these negotiations at one remove.
Okay.
Because I think that it's going to be very, very difficult. He's been the face of Ukraine, and he's been leading all these sort of talks, and it's very difficult for me now to see that he can actually pick up where he left off before this.
Mary and Simon, thank you. Mary Dejevsky, their Foreign Affairs columnist of The Independent, and Simon Diggins, Colonel Simon Diggins, defence analyst. Quick reaction from Phil and Lucy on the debate desk. Lucy.
A couple of things. Firstly, I think it is important to recognise that Zelensky is possibly now an obstacle, and I liked Mary's idea of an envoy. When you have a fraught situation, if the game is just carrying on in the same way, there's never going to be a change until one of you gets off the pitch. So that definitely needs to happen. But I think, what do we do about this invitation for Donald Trump to meet the King? Do we then have to play the same game with Trump if he's all about the deal? And this isn't just about the Ukraine war. This is about minerals. Don't forget, all Donald Trump cares about is access to the minerals in Ukraine.
I want to hear from Starmer in some depth.
Do we hold that as if you're not going to behave, then we're going to send you to the naughty step.
We're going to hear from Starmer on Monday. I'd be very surprised if we don't hear from him tomorrow as well after this summit. Phil, very briefly.
Very briefly, I just want to know why we haven't mentioned about how much this is actually costing the West. I think this is what concerns most people in this country.
£3 billion a year to us UK taxpayers.
Whenever anyone talks about the war in Ukraine, they seem to understandably get involved in the emotional side, but let's think with our heads for a moment. This is costing the West a lot of money, and we need to stop it.
Donald Trump has certainly thought about that. Okay, what do you think? I promise you we'll take a call after the break. 0344 499 1000. Zelensky versus Trump. Whose side are you on? Stay with us.
I said what I said, which is that we do have, of course, a special relationship with our friends in the UK and also with some of our European allies, but we also know that there have been infringements on free speech that actually affect not just the British. Of course, what the British do in their own country is up to them, but also affect American technology companies and, by extension, American citizens.
We've had free speech for a very, very long time in the United Kingdom, and it will last for a very, very long time. Well, no, I mean, certainly we wouldn't want to reach across US citizens, and we don't, and that's absolutely right.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
As promised, we'll take some calls now. Phil and Lucy are still with us on the debate desk. They're going to respond too. Phil in Hertfordshire, you're on with me and Lucy and Phil Dave. Zelensky versus Trump. Whose side are you on, Phil?
Good morning, folks. Yeah, I'm on the side of Trump.
Why is that, Phil?
Let's not forget, Trump has been ridiculed, persecuted, and had a witch hunt against him for how many years now? And I think a lot of these people need to wind their neck in. He's had 2 attempts made on his life. He's had political leaders lambasting him, abusing him on TV live in front of an audience. Now, is it only right?
Does all of that, I don't want an attempt to be made on anybody's life, never mind the leader of the free world. Does that give an excuse to act the way he did towards Zelensky yesterday, Phil?
This is what I think. He's sending a message out to all those people. He's got to learn who he can trust, who he can't trust. You know, you've got people that were saying what they said about him, sitting in front of him, you know, cozying up to him. How can he trust them? This bloke's got to find out. We're talking about something that's really crucial in the world, like Russia and the Ukraine. And he's got to see who is really firmly on his side, who he can trust and who he can't trust. Now, it's something, he's got to be 100% before he makes a decision. How he does it, how he goes about doing it, that's up to him.
Stay with me, Phil. I want to get a reaction from Lucy, and then I promise I'll come back to you. Lucy.
Well, trust is a two-way street. You can't just expect or demand trust. You've actually got to offer it as well. And I think the most damaging thing over the last 24 hours is the fact that there's so many leaders in Europe are going to be thinking, OK, we thought we could try and trust Trump, but we really can't now.
Do you think Trump is isolated now, Phil?
No. Why can't they trust him? What has he actually done?
Because he literally turns his back on people that he previously said he would be supporting. And
he's turned his back?
Yes, he's basically... And of course...
OK, hold one at a time. Lucy first.
I think what's really interesting is that for Trump, it's never been about Ukraine. It's been about the minerals in Ukraine.
OK.
It's about the deal.
Phil, do you want to respond to that?
Right, yeah, that's the first time I've heard him talk about the minerals. And how can
they were going to have a big deal on it. I mean, it is a thing they've discussed.
Well, yeah, fair enough. How much money has USA put into that country, and where's it gone?
An awful lot. An awful lot.
Absolutely. They can't account for it. Now, is that a good business deal to just keep giving away billions with no accountability where it's gone? If I run my own business and I kept, wasting money, just throwing out, I'll be out of business.
Phil, thank you. Let's go to Carol in Cornwall. Carol, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Oh, thank you, Peter. Well, I certainly disagree with the previous caller practically on every point. Just briefly on trust. Trust is not something you give to someone. Trust is something that has to be earned. And I'm a dual national, actually, and I can assure everybody listening that you can never trust the Americans. You really can't. And, they have a completely different mindset about Europe. But that's, just my opinion.
Okay.
But the thing is, I think the way that they humiliated Zelensky last night was, I think it was probably predetermined. I think that Trump has to make Zelensky the bad guy in order for him to go and kowtow to Putin. This is a very, very dangerous thing to do because Putin is a bad man.
Carol, hold on just for a second. I want to get a reaction from Phil Dave, not just to what you said, but what Phil in Hertfordshire said. And then I promise I'll bring you back in for a final word, Carol, before the news. Phil Dave.
Okay, well, really quickly, I think that it's amazing you were saying about, Carol, how trust has to be earned. Well, as far as I'm concerned, Donald Trump is actually sort of one of the most successful peacemakers that we have seen in more than a generation. You know, people rapidly forget how instrumental he was in, say, the Abraham Accords, which, of course, has actually brought peace to the vast majority of the Middle East. And I know everyone would sort of say, you know, what's going on there at the moment, that's not exactly peace. That's actually as a consequence of something that President Obama did, but let's not go into that particular part now. So I'd say that the fact that he has managed to achieve the almost impossible by bringing some of the Arab countries and the Israelis to the same table and actually get them to normalise.
He also spoke to North Korea. He opened a conversation with North Korea
Absolutely.
as well.
As far as I'm concerned, give him a chance, for goodness sake, because let's be honest, Biden's way hasn't worked so far.
Carol, should we give Trump a chance as a peacemaker?
Well, we don't have any choice but to give him a chance. But I do think that Europe has to step up. It has to spend more on defence, and we do have to stick by Ukraine because, you know, I think Zelensky said that, oh, there's an ocean between you to Trump. But, you know, there isn't. Alaska is only a few miles from Russia.
OK. Thank you, Carol. Very interesting. Final word to Lucy Beresford. What do you make of everything that's been said in the last 10 minutes or so?
Well, I think we're in a dangerous place because I think the volatility that we always knew lurked in Donald Trump, which wasn't on display with Macron, which wasn't on display when he met with Starmer, suddenly came to the fore with Zelensky. They obviously don't get on personally. Donald Trump was very clear, very keen to let everybody see that. He feels that there's a deal slipping away from him, the mineral deal that I keep talking about. And I think he did engineer a situation where a quite thin-skinned Zelensky did then blow up. And now Donald Trump can say, wasn't me. It's almost gaslighting, really. I didn't cause this problem, but now I can walk away for a very specific reason. And I think for that reason, Zelensky possibly does need to find a replacement.
Interesting thoughts there from Lucy Beresford and indeed Phil Dave on the debate desk. Ralph Schulhammer is coming up next, the political theorist professor at Webster University in Vienna. One of my most popular guests consistently. He will answer the question, Zelensky versus Trump, which side are you on? I want you to do that too. You can use the news break to lift the phone. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. This is a big diplomatic fallout. There's a lot more to come on this show and indeed tomorrow, big conference in London. We'll look ahead to that too here on Talk and get your views on the air. Plenty to discuss.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. It's just gone 11 o'clock. A feisty debate is being had this morning. I want you to take part in it too. We're asking the question, whose side are you on? And one of the biggest diplomatic spats I've ever encountered, and indeed Mary Dejevsky has ever encountered, the Independent's foreign affairs analysis guru, and she's covered quite a few of these things. Well, what do you think? Whose side are you on? Zelensky versus Trump? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. We're talking about that for the hour. It's so important. Our debate desk people, Phil, Dave and Lucy Beresford have stayed on for another 10 minutes or so. We're also going to talk to Ralph Schoelhammer and you. 0344 499 1000. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell, send me a voice note, send me a WhatsApp text message, or give me a ring 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss between now and 12 here on Talk. Well, a huge row in the Oval Office. It came at the end of a 45-50 minute session of the two men, Zelensky and Trump, sitting together. One particular point that Trump made was in regard to the $350 billion amount of American taxpayers' money that he says was given to Ukraine. Some people say those figures aren't quite right, but this is a flavour of what President Trump said to President Zelensky.
From the very beginning of the war, we've been alone, and we are thankful. I said thanks
you haven't
in
been
this
alone.
cabinet.
You
and
haven't
not
been
only
alone.
in this cabinet.
We gave you, through this stupid president, $350 billion.
You voted
we gave
for
you
your
military equipment, and you men are brave, but they had to use our military.
Yes. What about
if you didn't have our military equipment,
if you
didn't have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3 days. I heard it from Putin. In 3 days.
And then later on that evening, after he had left the White House, in fact been told to leave the White House, Zelensky went on Fox News. He talked about his desire for peace.
First of all, we want peace. That's why I'm in the United States. That's why I visited President Trump. And thanks for invitation again. The deal on minerals is the first step to security guarantees. It's meant for the peace, closer to peace. That's why I'm here. And we have tough situation. To understand it is to be in.
Loads of reaction from you as well. Let's play a couple of short voice notes. Stephen is in favour of Trump. This is what Stephen had to say.
I'm on the side of Trump. He speaks plainly. This is realpolitik. He's looking after the USA, and this cannot go on. Not for us in Europe or for the US or Ukraine. He's totally right. Those thousands of lives being wasted and the billions, if not trillions, that is going to be lost to our economies. We desperately need to concentrate on rebuilding the UK and Europe, and the US certainly needs to rebuild itself.
David has a different view. He thinks Zelensky got out of it badly. He's on his side. This is what David has voice noted us.
Good morning, Peter. To berate a president of a country on live TV was disgusting. It was a setup by Vance and it was a setup by Trump. They were instigating that all the way, and unfortunately Zelensky fell for it. Good show, mate.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Stephen. Ralph Schoelhammer is standing by. We're going to go to him in a second, but just very briefly, reaction to those voice notes from our debate desk panel members, Phil, Dave and Lucy Beresford. Lucy first.
I do think it was a shame that Zelensky, who may now just be so used to fighting a war on the battlefield, that he sees a war wherever he is, and so he fought back. And he did react very differently to Starmer, who wasn't going to poke the bear, very differently to Macron, and that maybe served him badly. But I do think that it was very unedifying of the way that Donald Trump behaved in his home turf. Zelensky was a guest in his White House and he bullied him.
Phil?
I think Trump represents a large number of the Western public where they are angry at how much money has been wasted on this senseless war. And as far as I'm concerned, you might not agree with his style and his way that he conducts himself, but the bottom line is this has got to stop. We have spent billions of our taxpayers' money on this. It's enough already. We've got our own problems. We don't need to fight someone else's.
We're going to talk to Ralph Schulhammer now. He's a political theorist and professor at Webster University in Vienna. Ralph, Trump versus Zelensky, whose side are you on?
Well, I would say it doesn't really matter whose side I'm on. In international politics, what matters is might, not morals. And the United States have the former, and Ukraine and Europe do not. And I think that's pretty much where we are. And the second crucial point is Donald Trump has been a public figure for nigh on 40 years. So what I do not understand is that everybody knows that he has a personal touch to politics. I would have assumed that at least Zelensky's advisors would have known that, and they would have prepared him accordingly. So I think all of this could have been avoided if, yes, I know it doesn't sound very dignified, but you have to grovel, right? You have, if you want to bend the knee, because Ukraine needs the United States more than the United States need Ukraine.
Did Zelensky overreact? Should he have played it in a different way, do you think?
Well, I understand what he did from a emotional perspective. I probably would have reacted the same way if the fate of Austria would have been at stake. But there is a chance that maybe even though the case that Zelensky is making is the right one, is a righteous one, that he might be the wrong person to present it. I mean, we have to face the fact that what Zelensky did was, from a purely diplomatic viewpoint, not very effective.
It's really interesting you mentioned that, actually, and I want to get into this a little bit more. And maybe I'm just reading in too much into this, maybe I'm doing it from a paranoid perspective, but quite a number of European leaders have expressed their solidarity with Ukraine in the last little while. Starmer has done that as well in a short statement. I expect we'll hear more from him over the next couple of days. Is this about solidarity with Ukraine? Because I'm not sure there's a lot of solidarity with Zelensky personally. What do you think, Ralph?
Well, I recently saw a tweet from the Prime Minister of Luxembourg who said, "We stand with Ukraine." But at the end of the day, what exactly is Luxembourg going to do to help Ukraine against Russia? And the same is true with the tweets from Ms. van der Leyen, Mr. Starmer, Mr. Macron. You don't win this war on social media, you win it on the battlefield. And when it comes to the battlefield, the support that Europe can provide is limited. And there's a second case I'm sure that your viewers and listeners are very well aware of. Governments in Western Europe have a legitimacy crisis, from London to Paris to Berlin. So the idea, as it is formulated by Mr. Starmer or Mr. Merz, the future German Chancellor, that you, for example, can send peacekeeping troops or battle troops to Ukraine, this is not going to fly with the population. There is a very strong sense, and you can agree or disagree with this. I tend to agree with it, but that's my personal opinion, that in Western Europe, political leaders are not capable of defending their own borders. They're not capable of keeping Britain British, France French, and Germany German, but apparently they can defend Ukraine's borders and they can keep Ukraine Ukrainian. And there's a significant segment of the population that thinks that there's something off. And this is why they will never support any kind of direct military support by European powers in Ukraine. Again, you can agree or disagree with this, but I think that's the reality we have to face.
We've got this big European summit in London tomorrow. Clearly, the entire complexion of that has been changed by what has happened in Washington yesterday. What should those leaders discuss? What should they agree? How should they deal with that? And what should Keir Starmer do, Ralph?
Well, I think the first thing is to face reality. 5 years ago, or actually you can say 11 years ago, Europe had a choice. The geopolitical scene was already changing with the whole issue over Crimea between Russia and Ukraine. But instead of getting ready in a military sense, in a defense sense, Europe decided we go down the Green New Deal, net zero, saving climate. And as we know now, saving the climate will come at the price of saving Ukraine. The world of politics is defined by trade-offs. There is no you can have it all at once. There is no you can have your cake and eat it too. And the decision Europe has made was to say that we just hope that somehow these things will go away. It did not go away, and now we are where we are. The very simple point is we do not have the industry, we do not have the arms procurement, we do not have the economic power, and even more importantly, there is not enough public support to give Ukraine the kind of supports that it would need. And I think this is just something we have to accept. Again, I'm not happy about it. But if you look at the numbers, I think 27% of British people would be willing to defend Britain, arms in hand. How many people do you think are actually willing to defend Ukraine arms in hand? I think that number is probably significantly smaller. Again, I'm not saying this in an approving way,
Sure.
but I think it is just the reality.
You're being very realistic about it. Thank you very much. That's Ralph Schulhammer there. He's a political theorist and professor at Webster University in Vienna. Very kindly, our debate desk regulars, Lucy Beresford and Phil Dave, have stayed on just for a little bit longer. Final word from you both. Phil, first, I saw you nodding along to a lot of what Ralph was saying there.
Yeah, I mean, look, let's be honest about this. The way politics seems to work at the moment is deflection. It's a case of if the politicians in the West can say, well, look at what's happening in Ukraine, it means that we're not necessarily paying too much attention to their own failings. What we're doing now is we're seeing Donald Trump come along, who has actually sort of put himself in the spotlight, either inadvertently or advertently, who knows, but he's done that to say, right, this is how I'm going to deal with this now, whereas every other Western leader has not said they're going to deal with the situation, when actually they just can't admit that, like Rolf has alluded to, they just don't even have the military resource needed to even contemplate supporting Ukraine in the way that it needs. I think he's absolutely spot on. We've got to admit that we've failed in the West when it comes to military action and military resource.
We can now look at Zelensky's plane. If you're watching on the screen, he has landed at Stansted Airport. This is for the European Summit that's taking place today and tomorrow. I wouldn't be surprised if we hear from him here in the UK, and probably Starmer too, tomorrow perhaps, and there's going to be a big debate in Parliament on Monday. What should they debate? What, we can imagine what their conclusions are probably going to be. Zelensky here in the UK, he's now gone from the arms of someone who really doesn't like him to Keir Starmer, who hopefully he will be some sort of peacemaker, the bridge that he wants to be between Trump and Zelensky.
Well, Zelensky is obviously going to hope that he's going to be landing amongst allies and that that's going to shore up support, but actually, what will that then mean? Will that mean that he gets more planes? Is he going to get more drones? Or is it just going to be words? And I think the problem we've got is that this is a real crisis at the moment in the war in Ukraine. But when all of this is done, what we'll be left with is an understanding that the likes of Putin are physical bullies, and they invade other countries, and Donald Trump is a psychological bully, and he has very squarely aligned himself now, America with Russia. Did we ever think in the days of Reagan and Thatcher that somehow America would end up siding with Russia? And that, post the Ukraine war, is going to be the ramifications of that are going to be global for many decades to come.
Lucy's absolutely right, as is Phil. Lots to discuss, and as Zelensky's plane lands at Stansted Airport, we can see that on the screen. If you're watching on the screen, I'll describe it for people who are listening on the radio. Unsurprisingly, it looks very much like a plane, and it has a Ukrainian flag on it as well, and he's getting off that plane into numerous black vehicles, the convoy, what the Americans call a motorcade, that will keep him safe and secure for the next few days. Those discussions are going to take place at Lancaster House in central London, near St James's Palace, and a number of European leaders are going to be involved in those. We'll speak to an opposition MP in Ukraine next, find out what he thinks and find out what the Ukrainian people are saying, how they're reacting to all of this. I want your reaction too. 0344 499 1000. In the meantime, thanks to Phil and Lucy on the debate desk. Plenty still to come in just a second here on Talk.
I don't like the way that he's been leading the country, and I didn't particularly admire him much as leader of the opposition. But I'll tell you what, we do need a strong relationship with the United States, and whatever he's daftly said about presidential candidates in the past, it's good that he's got over his own well, how can I put it, his own personal views, and is representing us in
but is there not also a reflective moment on that? And I take your point, and I understand that, you know, if it's Team Britain that we're on,
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Volodymyr Zelensky is leaving Stansted Airport. He has arrived there from America, and he is going in his convoy there, what the Americans call a motorcade, and that security conference is happening in the United Kingdom, in London, at Lancaster House over the next couple of days. I'd be very surprised if we don't hear from him at some point today or tomorrow. And Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, trying to perhaps be a bit of a bridge, as he said he wants to be, not just between America and Ukraine and the UK, but specifically between the two men, between President Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky. Can he do that? Is that the rule that he should do? We'll discuss that tomorrow, actually, with someone who knows Starmer well. But for the meantime, I want to get Ukrainian reaction to this, and an opposition Ukrainian MP is with me now, Alexei Goncharenko. Thank you for joining me. How are Ukrainians reacting to this extraordinary diplomatic row?
No, I can't speak on behalf of all Ukrainians. I think people have different points of view.
What is your point of view?
But all agree about one thing: it is a disaster. It is a disaster, and it is very bad. The only person who won yesterday is Vladimir Putin. It's so clear. So he's happy. When Putin and people like him are happy, it means everybody else, all normal people, should be super concerned because something bad had happened. And it's very bad. It's bad for the United States. It's very bad for Europe. And it's catastrophic for Ukraine. Catastrophic. So we need United States. I heard when I was waiting, when I will start my interview, I heard some of your experts said, oh, could we believe that in times of Margaret Thatcher and Reagan that the United States will be aligned with Russia? I mean, we can't just take it as a fact. We just need to fight for the United States. Because if it will happen, where will we all be? That would be a disaster, not just for Ukraine. Putin is super emboldened now. So if he will finish Ukraine, then he will take our people just to go further, to attack Baltic states where already British soldiers are staying, Romania, and so on, and Georgia, Moldova, and so on. I mean, so we can't just say, okay, we lose America. No, we lost America. No, we can't. Russia is an enemy. Is an enemy for 90% in the heads of 90% of Americans. Ask them, who is Russia? They will say, that's an enemy. So we need to speak with them. And really, I heard you said, and I agree 100%, that maybe Prime Minister Starmer can be this bridge maker. Maybe President Macron, both of them have good relationships with both Zelensky and Trump. Maybe Prime Minister Meloni. But we need to find these messengers, and we need to heal this division, this transatlantic division. We can't just take it, to take it for granted. No, we couldn't. And I mean, I'm shocked at what had happened yesterday.
Very interested.
Absolutely nothing good.
I'm very interested in your words. You say catastrophic for Ukraine. You're talking about healing this division. I want to get into all of that over the next few minutes. But Alexei, from the point of view of you and other Ukrainians, I know you don't speak for everybody, of course, this is a catastrophic diplomatic row. There are words that have huge implications. But practically, what do you think will happen? Can you see America withdrawing its military support from Ukraine as a direct result of yesterday?
It's clear that there is a high chance that this will happen, and that's something we need to prevent. And you know, with all respect to European countries, I mean, yesterday we had a lot of statements from European allies, and I'm very thankful for all support to Ukraine. But you can't intercept Russian missile with a statement. You can't destroy Russian tank with a statement, because here it's too serious. It's not talking. Sorry for on talkTV, but it's already not talking. It's too serious. So yeah. I think we need to act, and again, we can't lose the United States. Will we fight without United States support? Yes, we will. We started this war without almost any support. We stopped Russia ourselves. Many countries thought that we will fall apart. We didn't. But it took so many lives, and now it again will take so many lives. It will take so many lives, and we are tired. We are exhausted. I mean, it can't last forever. So we need peace. That's my message is.
I wonder who you blame for yesterday's spat. You said that healing is needed. Do you think healing is possible after what happened?
I think healing is always possible. People are alive. I mean, both of these men, fortunately, they didn't kick one another. So healing is always possible. And this is politics, and that's not about them. It's about national interests of both countries. When you're asking whom to blame, you know, the last thing I want to blame right now, but I was asked just previously on one media, am I proud of President Zelensky? And just my answer was, I can't intercept Russian missile with a proud. And President Zelensky came to White House not to argue with Trump, but to find solutions with Trump. So he clearly failed to do this. What will it? We can say a lot. Do we like somebody likes President Trump or not? But we don't have any other president of the United States, and we will not have for years. So we need to work with him.
You talk about it doesn't really matter whether you're proud of Zelensky or not. Do you think he led yesterday? Is he being a good leader at the moment?
Yesterday it was a bad leadership. It was a bad result. So it's not place for some proud, because it's nothing to be proud of. It's not boxing. It's about our lives.
What happens now, do you think?
Now we need to heal this division. Now we need to take America back. Now we need to look for a peace on a more or less just peace for Ukraine and for Europe.
Sorry to interrupt you, but can all of that happen under President Zelensky? Is he part of the problem now, whether he should be or whether he shouldn't be? Donald Trump clearly views him as part of the problem.
Well, again, that's like with Trump. We can like or not, but he's the president. The same about Zelensky. There is no sense. I hope he's not part of the problem. You know, maybe emotions, maybe hard time, 3 years of fighting. All this is not making you, calmer. But he should be calm. He should be cold-blooded. That's something he should do, because too much responsibilities on his shoulders.
Really, really interesting there. In terms of what happens tomorrow and the European leaders, how harsh do you think they should be with President Trump? You talked about the statements and the solidarity and so on, but do they need to stand up to Trump? What needs to happen now? You're talking about healing and cool heads. Is that more important than defiance?
I think they need to try to sober both sides and not to stand. I mean, just okay, I will be happy. They will say, "Great, we are with Ukraine. Goodbye, America." Okay, to what next?
Yeah.
What will be after this? I mean, I can't understand this. So we don't need this. We need them to take both sides and say, "Here is our alliance. It starts in the United States. Geographically, it ends now in Ukraine." And we need to protect it. That's all we need to do. And after these two men, if you don't like one another, I don't know, go boxing. I don't know what can you do.
Okay.
But it's too serious.
Alexei, thank you. Alexei Goncharenko there, who's a Ukrainian MP in opposition to Zelensky. Lots and lots of messages. We'll get to a call in a second. Stephen Cumbria says the UK cannot afford to side with Europe over Ukraine. We've already needed the industrial might of the USA to save us twice. Starmer has more faces than the town hall clock. He can't ride two horses. We need to go on a war footing now, or we'll be caught with our pants down. Jane says, what many would like to hear from the UK Prime Minister is how he is going to protect his own borders. He is not doing that, and people are very concerned about that. That's echoing, I think, what Ralph was saying a little bit earlier on. Bill in Romsey says, morning Peter, the reason Zelensky is upset is that his country was being carved up between Putin and Trump. There's only one winner here, and it's Putin. Paul in York says, morning, I had great hopes for America voting for Trump. However, listening to Trump and his team publicly, premeditatedly, verbally abusing a head of state shook me to the core. I fear the only dictator present will again refuse to leave the White House. Leslie said, hi Peter, this war must end, or is Zelensky going to show more photos of the dead in another 3 years? That's part of what he did yesterday in the Oval Office. It's really interesting. We're going to talk to the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Priti Patel, at 10:45 tomorrow morning about all this. She will have, I would imagine, a lot to say about it, especially as that big conference is going on at Lancaster House in London. One more message before I go to Amanda in Reading is from Kelly in Wakefield. Good morning, Peter. Don't people understand what Trump is trying to do here? Yes, he wants a minerals deal to pay back the American economy, but also to stop China getting their hands on it. If the war doesn't end, China through Russia will have access eventually. Everything Trump is doing is to stop China. I'm sorry, but Trump is right, says Kelly in Wakefield. Amanda is in Reading. Amanda, is Trump right, or are you on the side of Zelensky? What do you think?
Hi, Peter. Great show as always.
Thank you.
I'm Team Zelensky. I think he was bullied yesterday. I think the whole thing is so unfortunate. But last night in Kev's show, somebody said, don't forget President Zelensky's not a president. He's actually just a comedian. And, you know, we in the UK talk about how vanilla our politicians are and how much we all hate it. And Trump saying, I've empowered you to be a tough guy. Trump has been in the cozy Oval Office for 5 minutes. Zelensky has been fighting a war. You know, he was a tough guy the day that Russia invaded his country. He has led his people. He's been on the front line. And I'm absolutely incensed that he was treated like he was. You know, somebody said earlier, one of your speakers, that, you know, he's in war mode. And he didn't fawn over Trump like Macron and Starmer did. He's in fight mode. He's there to get help to win a war. So, yeah.
Can he get that help? Do you think this war is winnable now, especially if Trump pulls out the American forces and, well, American help anyway in Ukraine?
Hopefully Trump will grow up and, you know, hopefully these talks in the UK will show a little bit of strength that is not the US. And yeah, I really hope discussions keep going and everyone just grows up a bit.
You've used the word hope a few times there, Amanda. There's always hope, isn't there? Yeah, thank you, Amanda. I appreciate that. Dee says, if you want to discuss this matter, you really need to watch the whole segment, the whole 50 minutes of the interaction between Trump and Zelensky. Zelensky provoked this argument by challenging J.D. Vance, which was out of order. J.D. Vance, of course, the Vice President. Zelensky made it clear he wants more money and air cover, not peace. Had we had this attitude, the ceasefire with the IRA would never have happened, says Dee. Kev Mears in Shropshire says, Peter, you misrepresented what happened. Zelensky started it in front of the cameras. I'm on no side to answer your question, apart from to stop the killing and stop the war. The only way is through negotiation, but behind closed doors. American people have spent billions thanks to Biden. Now the truth is out. Trump and Vance, with the help of DOGE, to highlight the actions of the globalist. This is where the problem lies. John says Trump only uses people for his benefit. He doesn't have friends. Putin has helped him win both elections somehow. Trump needs Putin to get the Trump dynasty going, to get his daughter elected the next USA president in the elections, making her the first female president, and his sons will follow. Well, I actually think J.D. Vance may well be the candidate. One more from Ian before the break. I don't care who anyone agrees with. I would just like to say a massive thank you to Trump and Vance for allowing the world to see the debate. If there was to be a World War III, it affects us all, and we should see how world leaders are trying to avoid it or drag us into it. I would also like to know Mr. Zelensky's personal weapon assets now compared to when the war with Russia started, and correlate with his earnings in the same period. If everything adds up, then that's great. Any person who has a brain, says John, will back Zelensky. A different perspective there. We're asking the question today, who do you back, Zelensky or Trump? This is a major diplomatic row. We're going to talk to Steve Gill in a second, former advisor to the Clinton and Bush administrations. He is going to have one or two opinions, as do you. Plenty of voice notes lined up, calls as well. Get your voice heard before 12 o'clock, 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Shane's in Sydney and says, I'm sorry, I didn't like the way Trump belittled Zelensky. Why does Donald Trump defend Putin? I just don't understand. Another top show, says Shane in Sydney. I think Trump has gone too far, says Penny in Essex. I was all for him becoming president because he would definitely sort out the migration situation. My husband thinks it was a setup, instigated by a member of that audience saying he lacked respect by not wearing a suit. It was actually a journalist in the audience who mentioned that about half an hour previously, perhaps even 40 minutes previously. So I'm not sure the two are necessarily linked, although some people say they are. Penny continues, Zelensky only learnt English a year ago and wasn't given a chance to speak. Trump appears to have become unhinged. He would never have done this to Putin. It was appalling and painful to watch. I think he's had English before then. I think, because do you remember he spoke to Parliament, for example? That was more than a year ago, Penny. But yeah, certainly his English is not, as fluent as, shall we say, my Russian or Ukrainian. Steve Gill is with us. We're going to go to him in a second, but I just want to remind ourselves of this row. Really interestingly, JD Vance involved as well, the Vice President. Let's have a little flavour of what went on in the White House yesterday.
We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that. Remember this. You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
Feel influenced.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. Right now, you don't. You're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country, that's backed you far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once? This entire meeting? No, in this entire meeting, have you said thank you? You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
Please, you think that if you will speak very loudly about the war,
He's not speaking loudly. He's not speaking loudly. Your country is in big trouble.
Can I
Wait a
answer?
minute. No, you've done a lot of talking. Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
Fascinating stuff. I've seen it a number of times now. I was on air when the pictures came through, and my goodness. We're going to talk to Priti Patel about this tomorrow. She is the Shadow Foreign Secretary. She'll be on at about 11:15 tomorrow as part of the programme that I'm doing between 10 and 1 tomorrow. Lots more to discuss on all of this. And Zelensky has just touched down at Stansted Airport. He has come directly from America for a big European peace conference that is taking place tomorrow. Starmer heavily involved, of course, as well. That's at Lancaster House in central London. Zelensky has touched down and indeed has tweeted, "America's help has been vital in helping us survive, and I want to acknowledge that," says Zelensky. "Despite the tough dialogue, we remain strategic partners, but we need to be honest and direct with each other to truly understand our shared goals." He adds that Ukraine is very grateful to the United States for all the support, especially during the 3 years of full-scale invasion, and gives his thanks to President Trump. Well, Steve Gill is former advisor to the Clinton and Bush administration. Steve, that is a very, very interesting tweet. There's a lot in that. What do you make of it?
Well, a little, too late. I mean, those are not the comments or attitude that he was expressing in that meeting. And keep in mind that the contentious part, and you and I have been involved in contentious meetings in politics as a lawyer in business. I've never seen anything like this in public and very rarely even in private. But they were about 25 or 30 minutes into a meeting that was going very congenially when Zelensky started pushing the buttons. I think it was intended. I think he was told by his masters in Western Europe to poke it to Trump. He did, and that was the response he got.
Is your view, Steve, that this is Zelensky's fault?
Absolutely. And I think when you're going to ask your banker for more time to save your house from going into foreclosure and mortgage, you don't roll your eyes, you don't call your banker a bitch, and you don't argue with them. You say, "Thank you for giving me a little bit more time to save my house." And keep in mind that part of the frustration of President Trump, of Marco Rubio, of J.D. Vance, this is the third time that Zelensky has promised to sign this minerals deal and balked. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, went to Ukraine after it had been negotiated to have it signed. He backed away. Last week, Zelensky had promised to sign. He backed away. He showed up yesterday to sign the minerals deal. Marco Rubio
but Trump threw him out of the White House. But he was thrown out of the White House. He may well have signed it yesterday, no?
It has not been signed. And Marco
but he could have yesterday. But Steve, he could have signed it yesterday had he not been thrown out of the White House by Trump.
He had already balked at signing it, and that's one of the reasons Marco Rubio, sitting on the couch, looked so frustrated and angry. Okay. It's one of the reasons the president was angry. Scott Bessent has said this is the third time he has refused to sign the deal they had negotiated, and was then suddenly throwing new terms. We want guarantees moving forward. We want this. We want that. Again, if you're facing foreclosure and your banker shows up to give you a little extra time, that's not when you start demanding that they build a new pool and a hot tub for you.
Okay, let's get a sense of what Zelensky said later on yesterday afternoon in Washington. They're, of course, 5 hours behind, so this is around tea time that he spoke to Fox News.
First of all, we want peace. That's why I'm in the United States. That's why I visited President Trump. And thanks for the invitation again. The deal on minerals is the first step to security guarantees. It's meant for the peace, closer to peace. That's why I'm here. And we have tough situation. To understand it is to be in.
Do you believe Zelensky, Steve?
Well, I believe that was the backfill after that disastrous meeting. Again, his own ambassador to the U.S. was clutching her face and almost in tears because she saw what was happening. And in that same interview with Bret Baier at Fox News, Bret asked him, "Do you feel like you owe an apology to President Trump and to J.D. Vance?" And he said, "No, I did nothing wrong." He was still refusing to acknowledge his behavior.
Do you think, just speaking of behavior, I mean, do you think that Trump and Vance were totally justified in their behavior? I mean, it was pretty hectoring. It was pretty, some would say, bullying, Steve.
I think, again, when you had the first 35 minutes, things were moving forward. They were, but
things can change very quickly.
They have lunch. When he started attacking J.D. Vance, started rolling his eyes, called J.D. Vance, interestingly, a bitch in Russian, not in Ukrainian, which is kind of odd. When you look at,
I didn't realize that. Did that happen,
Suka.
Steve?
He called him Suka. and that is under his breath. It is on videotape.
That's the first time I've heard that, Steve. You sure about that, Steve? Yeah?
I'll send you the clip.
Okay, I look forward to that. Very, very interesting. Final question, Steve.
And in Russian, not Ukrainian.
Okay.
And again, keep in mind, Zelensky didn't even speak Ukrainian until he was becoming, president by being pushed in by the Western powers. So, like most of his country in eastern Ukraine, they speak Russian. So did he.
What happens now?
I think it's very difficult for Zelensky and Ukraine to restore trust. You've already lost Lindsey Graham. He's calling for him to resign. You have members of the parliament in Ukraine calling for an impeachment. I think because of the 3 times that he lied to the U.S. government, to Scott Bessent, to Marco Rubio, that I'm going to sign this deal, and then shows up and instead of signing, having lunch and moving forward, he again backtracked and lied about what he was there to do. That is very difficult to restore trust. It may be possible, but it is going to be very difficult to restore trust with Zelensky at this point.
Steve, thank you. That's Steve Gill there. He's a former advisor to the Clinton and Bush administrations. Lots of reaction from you. Let's play a couple of voice notes before the break. Let's start with Glenn, and he says this all started when J.D. Vance mentioned diplomacy.
Hi, Peter. As I recall, the problem at the meeting last night started when J.D. Vance mentioned that diplomacy was now required to end the troubles in Ukraine, and that was when Zelensky, understandably, I suppose, the man's under pressure, that was when he started to get annoyed. That was how I saw it starting, and I do not agree with Lucy Beresford at all that this is all staged, managed, and it's all about the minerals. Like the gentleman said earlier, America have ploughed billions into this, absolute billions, and it can't carry on. Russia are not right in trying to take Ukraine's land, but it can't go on forever. Cheers.
Thank you very much indeed, Glenn. Really interesting to hear from you. Someone on text says if the President of America tells you're gambling with World War III, you should listen. Another person says, I thought Trump had become our saviour from Starmer, but having witnessed what happened with Zelensky, I'm disappointed. It was cruel and humiliating for Zelensky and should have happened behind closed doors, not humiliating the man in front of the world. Let's hear another voice note from Jim.
Good morning, Mr. Cardwell. Yeah, just a very quick one. Talking of the billions and billions that have been sent to Ukraine, yeah, it would just be nice if somebody could answer the question, why haven't we seen a receipt? It'd be nice to sort of see a receipt or two. Where has all this money gone? And why are so many of his officers suddenly driving around in really nice cars? Could we sort of see, may I ask where the money's being spent? That's all, nothing more.
Perfectly legitimate question. Tez in Wales says the West has had it easy in regard to peace in the last few decades and become complacent in what the world is actually like. Unless they collectively take over Russia, you're always going to have a Putin. They had chances to stand up to him but haven't done so. Maybe Trump and America have done enough of everyone relying on them so much, and there's uproar at the moment they say something there's uproar at the moment they say something Europe doesn't like. Hillary says, I've never heard so much rubbish. Zelensky was totally in the wrong yesterday. Not a Trump fan, but he did the right thing. Has Zelensky never heard of not biting the hand that feeds you? Sue in Lancashire, I fully agree with Phil, who spoke earlier. This has been orchestrated and planned. Trump is not being played by Putin. I think it is actually the other way around. Becky and Devon, Trump has a record of making headlines around the world to instigate the change he wants. To make headlines across the globe, it has to be controversial. Plus, Trump is Marmite, and he uses that to his advantage. One more before the break. Joe in Brentwood, he says, I think this shows the UK and Europe haven't been spending enough on defence for decades, and America has had enough. Why should American forces make up 30% of the European defence? I also think to achieve peace, and Putin, Ukraine, needs to be made out to have caused this war so Putin can save face. Joe, interesting thoughts there. Lots of interesting thoughts. Lots of voice notes and messages coming in. We're going to take some calls as well in a minute. Lots more opinions between now and 12. Stay with us.
So this is one of those bizarre professions where you are two-faced. You just are. And Keir Starmer is that. He completely is. But I saw cartoon hearts shooting out of his eyeballs as he sat there next to Donald Trump. And based on the fact that I'm old enough to remember during the 2024 campaign season, Labour sending members over to the United States to campaign for Kamala Harris, that did surprise me to see Keir Starmer so lovey-dovey towards him.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Julia in Mansfield says, I'm with Zelensky. I thought he did extremely well considering Trump and Vance were ganging up on him, and English is his second language, which in my opinion he speaks brilliantly. Ian says, a deal has already been done. Yesterday's pantomime was that so Zelensky can agree to a bad deal for Ukraine publicly in the coming days and not getting criticised in future by saying his hands were tied. He then walks away from politics, a billionaire, and because America now has assets in Ukraine, they will take it personally if Russia launch a future attack that affects the USA. Ian, I worked in politics for 3.5 years. Believe me, it is 99% cock-up, 1% conspiracy. I would be very surprised if that is the case, but it's a good theory and it's an interesting theory, and I'm very happy to read it out. John in Texas has been in touch on a voice note all the way from the Lone Star State.
Hi, this is John from Texas. I think what happened yesterday was there probably been some preliminary discussions, of course, ahead of the press briefing in the Oval Office, and once they got into the room, it appeared to Vance and Trump that the what had been discussed was being changed in some way by Zelensky, whether Zelensky meant that or not, and then it just devolved from there. I still think there's hope that peace can occur and that things can get back on track, but right now it's looking pretty grim. Thank you.
Well, thank you, John. Very interesting there. Let's hear from Phil as well.
Some of your so-called experts haven't got a clue. The world has been in danger for a long, long time. And Donald Trump is trying to stop war, stop killings, stop the murder of millions of people, and possibly World War III.
Thank you to Mark in Bristol. He says, I'm absolutely furious. It's a total stitch-up. Vance shouldn't have even been there, humiliating Zelensky while brushing Trump's ego for his own political gain. The pair then used the talks to have a political dig at the previous administration. The pair of them didn't even let Zelensky respond. In fact, Trump said he'd done a lot of the talking. They hadn't even let him speak. Simon says, I think this is a very clever move by Trump. He knows that the only way to provide the security guarantees Ukraine needs is for European leaders to provide that security and stop being so dependent on the US to solve their problems. Rob says Zelensky has been used to world leaders fawning all over him. He failed completely to deal with the pressure he came under from Trump. That shows he is not a world-class leader and need to accept that what he wants is not necessarily in his remit, says Rob. On Twitter, Holmes said, Trump did the right thing. Trump and Vance are the ultimate team. Ukraine, do we forget it was so corrupt? Also, how is Zelensky's bank account totally inflated? Questions need to be asked. Fiona says, if you watch the whole 53-minute conference, you see that Zelensky blew it. He was disrespectful and petulant. He was there was no ambush. He just didn't control himself, as he said himself. He doesn't believe in diplomacy. He wants the gravy train to carry on. Sella on Twitter says, during the last week, Zelensky agreed a rare earth deal with Trump that did not include a security guarantee. Trump first learned he'd changed his mind on the issue in front of the world's media. Trump and JD Vance had nowhere else to go. Zelensky made a big mistake. Justin says, Trump's spat yesterday will increase his popularity at home and will force Europe to spend more on its own defence. Surely that is win-win for Trump. Let's talk to Gary. He's a new caller. Gary, great to have you on the airwaves, I think, for the first time. What would you like to say?
Hello, Peter. I'd just like to say I think Trump was spot on, as he is quite a few times recently. He's calling it all out. It's the emperor's new clothes. He's walking around Zelensky as if he's a big soldier. He's not fired a shot in anger. He wants to send young men to die, you know, rather than look at a deal.
To defend his country against Russia, surely.
Well, why did the war happen? If you can't win, you get the best deal you can, don't you?
Did Trump go about it in the right way, Gary?
Me personally, I think Zelensky pushed it. And when you go to America and you go there, you're invited in, and you know, you play the game. Politicians play the game. He didn't play the game. He got out of his depth, and then Trump just put him straight. And then he started to get leery with J.D. Vance. And at the end of the day, Vance is quite a clever man, and he's hit it on the nail on the head. He is disrespectful. He wants something for nothing. He's like a gambler who wants to keep betting, but not with his money.
Gary, very interesting thoughts there. Thank you for that. Jenny in Oxford says, Peter, this is not about Trump and Zelensky. This is about whether the US government can now be trusted to uphold freedom, democracy and the international rule of law. After siding with Russia, Iran, North Korea and China in the United Nations, Trump has put that in question, says Jenny. Philip says, on reflection, I'm sure it was a setup and sadly Zelensky fell into their trap. Another factor is his poor English, which made it difficult for him to argue with two arrogant bullies, says Philip Roberts. Stephen Millings in Belfast says, Ralph was great, straight to the point, logical thoughts and cuts through the issue. You gotta love him. Everybody does, Stephen. John says, some said weak leadership would embolden our political enemies when Biden was president. I did not see strong leadership from the US yesterday. Putin would have slept easier last night. James in Bedford says, it's not about right or wrong. When Europe has spent decades nuzzling upon the bosom of America and being content with its parental protection, you then have no decision but to put what the parent tells you into action until you once again decide to be grown adults and have the ability to stand on your own 2 feet. What a boost, John says, it would be to Zelensky if the King greeted him while in London, but he won't. I don't think he's going to on this occasion. Let's go to another call now. Herbie is in Harrow. Herbie, what do you think? Whose side are you on? Hi there.
Well, I'm very upset with Trump, the way he behaved. I mean, you say it was completely out of character and out of order. You know, you don't belittle somebody like that who's in a crisis at the moment. You know, the man's going through hell. We can, well, you know, imagine why Trump behaved like that. It should have been done in private, not with the mass media. I think Trump made himself look very small, to be honest, on this occasion. And what's behind the agenda? Russia owns the minerals that he's after. Is he trying to get 50% of this from Zelensky and then say to Russia, look, we've got 50%, you've got the rest, let's do a deal? I can't believe that. Something's behind this, Peter. It's got to be, for him to behave the way he did.
Okay, Herbie, thanks for your thoughts there, Herbie and Harrow. Mike says your guest was correct earlier when she says there are two bullies, the psychological bully Trump and the physical bully Putin. One undermines and the other punches. It's abuse in all but name. Paul says, I think Trump has shown how small and weak a man he is to bully someone who's undoubtedly in an inferior position. Money, 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 and how unprincipled he is under scrutiny. Ray says, respect. Why should he show respect? Didn't Trump call Zelensky a dictator last week, says Ray from Huntington? He did, but he forgot about it. Deb in Newcastle says, Trump wants peace. Zelensky wants to continue the war with everybody else's money. He needs to be told enough is enough. But no doubt Starmer will throw our hard-earned pounds at him. It seems Europe and the UK want to carry on funding this war until we're bankrupt. Barry in Morecambe, final thought before we go to Malcolm in Oxford. Barry says, what's the end deal hoping to be gained from America and Russia? Is there a deal between Putin and Trump? What's going to happen to the land gained by Putin? Looks as if Ukraine is to lose half its minerals on a big area of land without border protection. No wonder Zelensky is bitter, says Barry in Morecambe. Malcolm in Oxford, great to have you on the air. We have literally about 1 minute. What would you like to say?
Straightforward. All these people that are backing Zelensky, they're not coming up with a solution. We need a solution. This war cannot continue as it is.
What should the solution be, Malcolm?
I think the solution is taking a peace, a ceasefire and negotiations. There's no other way. And it's now down to Europe, the great EU and their federal state to actually fund Ukraine.
Okay.
I don't want to see people being killed day after day after day.
Yeah.
And if you back Zelensky, please tell us what the solution is.
Do you back Zelensky? Do you back Trump? Maybe neither, maybe both.
I don't back either of them.
Okay.
I just back peace. We need peace.
Okay.
And at least with Trump,